The first thing the assessor Veth-Kal noticed about the third planet was that it was trying to kill everything on it, and nothing on it had noticed. She had catalogued 47 inhabited worlds in her career with the Conclave Survey Division. She had walked the ammonia flats of Doric Prime, where the colonists wore sealed suits and never touched bare ground. She had documented the Siviri homeworld, whose axial tilt produced seasons so violent that the entire civilization migrated twice yearly like a single enormous organism. She knew Deathworlds. She had the citations and the scar tissue to prove it. This world was different. Veth-Kal pressed 4 of her 6 hands flat against the observation glass and stared at the readout from the atmospheric probe. The numbers did not make sense the first time, so she ran them again. Nitrogen, 78%. Oxygen, 21%. 21%. Reckon, she said to her junior analyst, who was eating something out of a sealed container and pretending to read instrument logs. What is the combustion threshold for free oxygen in a closed atmosphere? Reckon looked up. He was young enough that his carapace still had the pale banding of adolescence. Roughly 16% triggers sustained combustion. Above 23 or so, almost any spark becomes a runaway fire event. The third planet is at 21. He put down his container. And the surface, she continued, pulling up the composite imaging, is covered with photosynthetic organisms that produce more of it continuously. The atmosphere is, at any moment, approximately 2% below catastrophic. They looked at the images together. Green, remarkable amounts of green. Great blue-gray oceans interrupted by land masses so densely overgrown with oxygen-producing life that from orbital distance they appeared almost to breathe. Which, in a meaningful sense, they did. The dominant fauna, Reckon said slowly, reading from the preliminary biological sweep, are oxygen-breathing. Yes. They require the oxygen to survive. Yes. So the oxygen that could kill them all in a single lightning strike is also the oxygen they need to. Yes. Veth-Kal pulled up the next layer of data. And it gets worse. The gravity was one standard. That was fine, unremarkable. The surface temperature range was the problem. At the equatorial zones, temperatures climbed high enough to cook most conclave-registered life forms. At the poles, cold enough to freeze nitrogen out of solution. And between those extremes, the planet experienced what the probe's meteorological modeling called weather events atmospheric disturbances, in which the sky itself became violent. Electrical storms that sent 50,000-volt discharges into the ground. Rotational wind systems large enough to level structures. Solid-state precipitation that fell from the sky and struck with enough force to injure. The sky struck things. The indigenous intelligent species, Veth-Kal said. She pulled up the visual captures from the long-range drone they'd slipped into low atmosphere 6 days ago. Here. The images were grainy, but sufficient. Bipedal. Bilaterally symmetrical. Thin skin to a degree that was almost embarrassing. No carapace. No secondary membrane. No dermal plating of any kind. A thin layer of keratin over a skeleton of calcium that any determined predator could breach. They moved through the open air as though the air were safe. In many of the images, they were not even wearing their environmental suits. They have environmental suits, Reckon said, leaning forward. In several captures, the beings wore layered coverings. But in these, he pointed to a sequence, showing a group of them gathered around some kind of outdoor structure. They've removed them. The temperature in that sequence was approximately 28 degrees. They appear to find it comfortable. Their thermal tolerance range is wide. Unusually wide. And they are everywhere on the planet, Reckon. Not clustered at the habitable median. Everywhere. Both poles. The deep desert zones. The storm corridors. She traced the distribution map with one finger. Red dots at every latitude. They live in the places that should kill them. And they have built structures there. She had been doing this work for 19 years. She had a professional vocabulary for what she was looking at. She used none of it. "I want a full social observation sweep before I file the preliminary," she said. "Take us to geostationary above the northern temperate zone. We'll spend 30 days. Reckon nodded, already moving to navigation. Then he stopped. Assessor. The breathable atmosphere window 21%. If we sent a team to the surface. We are not sending a team to the surface. Right. Of course. He paused. Do the natives know about the oxygen threshold? Veth-Kal looked at the green and blue world, turning slowly in the dark below them. Somewhere down there, thin-skinned creatures were walking around in an atmosphere that was perpetually a bad afternoon away from a global fire event. In bodies that could be killed by a sufficient temperature drop, on a planet that seemed to generate new ways of murdering things at a geological pace. "I don't think," she said, "that they have considered it in those terms." She pulled a fresh observation log and began writing. Day 1. The third planet of System Sol is classified in our preliminary survey as a Category 7 Deathworld. High biological complexity. Single intelligent species. The species is bipedal, unarmored, and apparently without awareness of the conditions under which it lives. Begin. Extended observation. Do not make contact. She underlined the last sentence. Then, because she was a thorough researcher, she added a note in the margin. The oxygen. And then, because she had 19 years of experience and had learned to trust the feeling she got when a planet was about to surprise her, there is something wrong with this assessment. I do not yet know what. She left the note in place. It seemed important to record the uncertainty before it was resolved, because, in her experience, the resolution was always stranger than the question. Outside the observation glass, the blue-green world turned, and did not catch fire. On the 14th day, Veth-Kal discovered laughter. She had been cataloging communication patterns. The natives had at least one primary spoken language in the observation zone, a rapid, complex vocal system that used a remarkable range of frequencies given the species' relatively small respiratory apparatus. The linguistic sweep AI was making progress. It had flagged certain vocalizations as high-frequency social markers, recurring in specific interpersonal contexts. The AI called these markers non-semantic, affective utterances and filed them under miscellaneous. Veth-Kal pulled the flag and listened. The sound came from a group of 4 adults gathered around the sort of small fire they frequently maintained in outdoor settings. The drone footage was clear enough to see their faces, which were extraordinarily mobile. The Conclave had documented perhaps 30 species capable of significant facial musculature expression. None of them did anything quite like this. The natives' faces moved constantly, subtly, in ways that appeared to communicate in parallel with their speech, skepticism, attention, discomfort, a narrowing around the eyes that seemed to mean something specific, and intermittently, all 4 of them would open their mouths and produce this sound. This ha-ha-ha, or heh, or something lower and more sustained, and their faces would crinkle, and their bodies would shake slightly, and they would sometimes touch each other. She replayed the sequence 6 times. "They make a noise," Reckon said, coming to stand beside her. "When things are not threatening. When things are funny," Veth-Kal said. She had gotten that far in the linguistic preliminary. Funny was a word the AI was struggling with. The closest conceptual match in Conclave standard was incongruously harmless or possibly safe surprise. Neither captured it. They make a noise when something is true in an unexpected way. No. That's very specific. It appears to be involuntary in extreme cases. The body responds before the decision to respond. Look. She pulled up a different capture, an indoor setting. 2 natives. One of them producing the sound so intensely that water came from their eyes and they bent nearly double. Physiological response. Uncontrolled. The body insists on the reaction. Quote, Reckon studied it with the expression he used when he was deciding whether to say something. It looks a little like our distress vocalization. I thought the same thing. She had spent 2 days with that comparison. But watch the context. This occurs in safe environments, among bonded individuals. After an exchange that the AI tags as containing an incongruity or unexpected reversal of meaning. It is not distress. It is, she paused. I do not have the word. It is the sound of a being noticing that the universe is strange and finding that acceptable. She filed it under social cohesion mechanisms and moved on because she was a professional and she had a survey to complete. On the 17th day, she discovered crying. Not the water from eyes of intense laughter different. The context was a gathering of perhaps 30 individuals around a structure that the linguistic sweep suggested was related to death commemoration. The faces were not crinkled. They were open, exposed, the way soft tissue looks when the protective habit is suspended. The sounds were different in frequency and rhythm. The bodies moved toward each other and held still. Veth-Kal had documented death commemoration in 11 species. In most, it was a formal process, ritualized disposal of the body, a period of reduced social activity, a gradual return to function. In the Sivari, whose concept of individual selfhood was diffuse to begin with, death was acknowledged with a brief chemical signal and then life continued. This was not like that. The natives appeared to be performing their grief at each other, not withdrawing into it, but sharing it, distributing it across the group in some way she did not have the framework to fully describe. They touched each other. They made sounds. One individual, who appeared to be in more distress than the others, was surrounded by the others, in a way that looked the word that came to her was held, though several of them were not touching the distressed individual at all. The proximity itself was doing something. The shared presence was the mechanism. Reckon, she said. Come look at this. He came, and they watched together. They're comforting each other. He said. Yes. With their bodies, they're using physical nearness as a pain management mechanism. I think so. That's... He stopped. In his 19 months with the survey, Reckon had cataloged responses to grief in 4 species. He knew what the options looked like. That works? I think so. I think it works. On the 19th day, she caught a sequence of a single adult and a juvenile parent and offspring, the AI suggested, based on physical similarity and behavioral patterns in what appeared to be a daily grooming or care ritual. The adult was running its hands through the juvenile's head filaments, and the juvenile was still in a way that the footage suggested was unusual. This was a species that moved constantly, fidgeted, explored. The stillness was a product of the touch. The juvenile's face, the extraordinary mobile face, was simply quiet. She did not file this sequence anywhere. She watched it 3 times, and then she set it aside in a personal folder she labeled, without quite knowing why. Questions. By the 23rd day, she had documented something she had no category for in the survey's standard taxonomy. The natives appeared to derive pleasure from being near each other. Not the pleasure of resource acquisition, nor the satisfaction of threat removal, nor the comfort of reproductive success. Something else. They sought each other's company in the absence of any material reason to do so. They created spaces, the outdoor fires, the communal halls she could see in the settlement footage, the gathering places that seemed to serve no function except gathering specifically for the purpose of being together. They were, so far as she could determine, doing it on purpose. Veth-Kal sat for a long time with the observation logs spread around her in the dimmed cabin. Outside, below her, in cities and settlements and small groupings across the temperate landmass, thin-skinned creatures with mobile faces were making sounds at each other and pressing their bodies together and finding this, for reasons she had not yet categorized, sufficient. The preliminary report asked for a single-line species descriptor. She had written it in draft as territorial bipedal omnivore, tool-using, pre-conclave developmental stage. She looked at that line now and thought about the juveniles going still under a hand, and the bent double laughter, and the 30 individuals surrounding one who was in pain. She deleted the line. She wrote, "Social species, extreme." Then she wrote, in her personal notes where the report requirements could not find it, "They have found a way to make the suffering bearable. I do not know yet if they understand that this is what they are doing." The first snow came on the 31st day, and Veth-Kal moved the drone lower. She had read the atmospheric data for solid-state precipitation, had understood it intellectually as a cold season feature of temperate zone meteorology, had even watched the formation patterns in the clouds 3 days prior with professional interest. But watching it fall was different. White. It came down white, in quantities that altered the landscape within hours, softening and smoothing everything, covering the structures the natives had built until the settlement below looked like something being slowly swallowed.